Hello, and welcome to the Imposter Syndrome Network podcast, where everyone belongs, especially if you think you don't. Welcome, imposters. My name is Chris Grundeman, and I'm here with my co-host, the always informative Zoe Rose.
Heyo.
Hey, this is the Philip Koblence episode, and man, oh man, are you in for a treat. Phil co-founded NYI in 1996, which I'm fully aware is before some of you were born. So maybe we'll ask Phil about keeping the velociraptors out of the data center back then. In addition to building NYI into the success that it is today, Phil is also the CEO at Critical Ventures and a director of the OIX board. Plus, he's more recently created the Nomad Futurist podcast and foundation, which pretty sure we're going to talk more about today. Hey, Phil, would you mind introducing yourself a bit further to the Imposter Syndrome Network?
No, I think you did a pretty good job. My name is Philip Koblence, as Chris so aptly pronounced. Gosh, I don't know where to start. Again, I guess I started. Earlier in the pandemic, I decided to take it upon myself to write a resume just to see what that was like, because I've been at NYI for longer than certainly Zoe's been alive, and I realized that if I was doing it in the traditional form, it was like camp counselor and then founded NYI because it was so early. So, I guess my life started when I founded NYI in 1996 when I was 18 years old, maybe. I might have been 17. I'm not sure if it was my birthday yet. And, it was kind of at the beginnings of the internet. We wanted to be all things to all people at that point. I come from a background of, a father that was always entrepreneurial. He's a jeweler on 47th Street. So, I was never exposed to a lawyer or a doctor or someone that worked in a large corporation. So when the internet came in to kind of our lexicon, it just resonated with me, this idea that a computer was not going to be this static device and we can communicate using it, which now, kids like Zoe these days take for granted. This is going to be about Zoe. Everything is going to be compared to what Zoe thinks, even though I've only just met Zoe, who is from the Netherlands, apparently. So I realized early on, I must have been, having just turned 17 or so, I realized that that's what I wanted my future to be. And then, there's a whole story about how, we ended up coming up with NYI, or the New York Internet Company, which was the original name, et cetera. But I'll pause there for a moment because it was a question of introduce yourself. And my name's Phil.
Nice. Thanks, Phil. That's excellent. And as I mentioned in my introduction, you sit on the board of directors at OIX, which I think is probably a continuation of this interest in the internet that started when you were 17 or so. It was formerly called OpenIX. What I didn't mention is that you and I were both elected to the board in the most recent election, and that we both served as committee chairs before that, you with the IX committee and me with the BCOP and marketing committees. So that seems like maybe a great place to start today. I'm hoping maybe you can tell us a little bit about OIX and why you chose to volunteer your time and expertise with that particular group.
Let's start by saying that as it goes to directors, I think it makes you and I twins. We're twin brothers.
We are.
We're twin board brothers.
Twin boarders.
Incredible. Clearly, I'm the Danny DeVito and you're the Arnold Schwarzenegger of the twins. But you know what? I'll take it. Danny DeVito's an entertaining guy, right? So look, OIX, I think we've talked about this on a podcast before or a recording before. What I love about OpenIX and now OIX is it gives the ability for, people that have participated in the internet from its founding to kind of help set standards so that make it easier to have, newer entrants, incumbents, et cetera, and expand from a networking perspective, from a data center perspective, from an edge perspective, like taking the lessons that we learned, because when we started, there was no, how to run the internet for dummies, trying to create a set of standards that make barriers to entry and expansion of the internet and all of the awesome applications that come out of that more accessible and more ubiquitous and more transferable, so you're not beholden to a particular proprietary standard, and you can, move from vendor to vendor and recognize that there are certain standards that they put into place. Is that a good answer, Zoe?
It's okay. Okay.
Jesus. Tough crowd. I've always heard those Dutch are tough.
I heard I'm not Dutch, but we're blunt. I just happen to be here. So my thoughts were, yeah, okay, I might be a slightly different generation, but I'm not as young as you think.
You've aged incredibly gracefully, Zoe.
But looking at your history. I mean, you said you've co-founded NYI in 1996 and you're still there. That's quite a career at the same place. And I don't know, like, how do you, I mean, my generation, it tends to be you stay at a company for a couple of years, then you move on to another company. Maybe it's a bit different if you found a company, but you know, what's it like being at one organization for such a bloody long time?
I mean, part of it is a certain element of Stockholm syndrome, I assume. Look, I think there's always the desire to, I'm a creature of comfort. I've always been a creature of comfort. And I think that being such a young founder of a company like that, you kind of get to create a set of solutions and products in your image. So if what the evolution of a career is to try to, keep yourself excited, keep yourself invested, and try to keep yourself fulfilled. What NYI has allowed me to do, based on the fact that I was such a young founder, is kind of insert elements of my personality in the solutions that we offer. That's not to say that there's like a laugh reel that comes with every colo cabinet that we give, but it is just my personality is so entrenched in kind of NYI that there's never been a time that I've been there. Certainly, there have been frustrating times and ups and downs, and probably more downs than ups, if I'm being honest. But in general, it's always been fulfilling, and there's never really been this desire for me to try to fit myself into like a different kind of structure, as opposed to having a structure that kind of evolves a bit based on my own evolution. So I don't want to tie NYI like it's only me. It's not. We have obviously a team that supports the operation, but it's always given me the benefit of allowing me to evolve the offering, evolve my representation of NYI as I've evolved.
So it's interesting that you talk about kind of this entrepreneurial lens that you maybe were even raised to see the world through. And obviously, NYI, while you have been there for a long time, I think it's something like 27 years now or something.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, I'm going to say something 27 times just to make sure we get it all
27
all
shots.
there.
Take a shot for every year, everyone. That could be the...
It's going to be happening.
Why am I throwing up every time I listen to this one podcast?
It's a great episode.
Yeah, that's how you know.
But you said, you also said creature of comfort, which to me, like this idea of comfort and the idea of entrepreneurialism doesn't necessarily mesh. So I find that really interesting. And I wonder if we could kind of dive into that a little bit. I mean, it makes sense in the way you said it that, okay, once you've built this company kind of around yourself and you've got this team supporting you, maybe that becomes more comfortable. But I mean, there's still risk involved, right?
Oh, no. I mean, there's every day I think the definition of comfort is different, right? There's an incredible amount of discomfort that's associated with like operating an infrastructure company that has to be, online 24/7, right? You are one missed ping away from the phones, ringing out of control. I think when I talk about creature of comfort, it's simply about like the emotional comfort of not having to like move around or switch careers or switch jobs or not trying to. It certainly hasn't been, I don't think, for me, the most opportunistic in terms of how I can get the most money. It's never really been about, trying to find like the pathway to most wealth creation, because obviously, given the timing, there were probably times that it would have been better to monetize where NYI is in the space in terms of the ebbs and flows and M&A and all of those things. But for me, it's always been like you spend so much of your time working that if it feels like work and a job, it's just not fun, right? And if you can make the time that you spend working like something that allows you to experience it in the same way that you would experience a hobby or, going to a family affair, there's just something comforting around going to a place that you don't. It's like Cheers, it just feels like home. So that's what the creature of comfort is. Every element, every solution, every service, you're always remembered for your outages or downtimes. Not that NYI has ever had any, but you're always remembered. Nobody ever calls you to say thank you for, the 99% of the time you stayed up. So even when I'm like pitching services now, I don't represent 100% uptime. I represent 100% like chance of you going down at some point. And the question at the end of the day, 99.99% of the time, it won't be our fault. But who would you rather call? It's the Ghostbusters pitch, right? Who would you rather call when something went down? Do you trust us to, help try to steer you in the right direction? and get you back up as quickly as possible? Or would you rather use, a larger company that's, more bureaucratic, et cetera, and more concerned about the liability of admitting to downtime or things like that? All we care about is making our customers successful. And that's something that's difficult to kind of mold that with your personality if you, try to do that within an organization that maybe you didn't find. And maybe it's not that hard. It's just the creature of comfort element to it is just the comfort of being like under the umbrella that I've created. Even though the umbrella has holes, I just know where the holes are, so I avoid getting wet. There's so many weird metaphors that I'm not sure that there's any benefit from me continuing. Go ahead. Jeez Louise, Zoe, control yourself. My God.
This is a hard episode to record. Apologies to our sound guy.
It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun to edit. Yeah.
So after this, it's a long journey for you. 27 years. I just have to bring that up again. But what does your day look like? I mean, it sounds like it's so ingrained in you, the way the organization works, the passion that you have, the values of the organization. It's almost like it's you, but in a company. So what does your day look like? How do you structure your day? Is it random or is it very structured?
It's not very structured. I don't believe in structure. I don't know if you could tell that by the way I'm responding to these questions. I try not to over calendar myself, even if I go to you go to these events all the time, PTC, ITW, all of these things where you constantly are talking to people. They're like, oh, I'm back to back. I have meeting after meeting after meeting of absolutely useless conversation that ends up going nowhere. I much rather just be there and see where the feeling kind of takes me. And, the day is structured. I mean, I'm not just walking around with a bunch of patchouli and barefoot trying to figure out what to do. Obviously, there are meetings and goals that we have for a particular day. But I'm also not naive enough to think that I have any control of where the day takes me, because it's one of those things where the only thing I can prepare for is that there's going to be some unexpected thing that I have to deal with, whether it's on the operations side or on the sales side or some opportunity that comes in, or on the business side or on the strategy side or what have you. So I can also say, because, we live in this hybrid, I'm joining from home right now. So, I'm going to the office, maybe 2 or 3 times a week. And because it's, a company that I founded, there's some flexibility that I can weave into that schedule, but I'm also not working, 9 to 5. It's very much a kind of 24-hour clock. That's not to say that I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm, working on proposals or come up with an idea. It's just that I am going kind of in and out of different projects varying over the course of a day, which I recognize is probably not the most efficient way to operate, but it's the way to operate that keeps me personally kind of engaged, because it doesn't feel like I'm clocked in and I need to clock out. And that's the thing that's comfortable to me. Like, I don't want to be, I had this article that I wrote at the beginning of the pandemic when, everyone went home. And at that point, we were operating an office downtown. We had another data center in a different building downtown. And we had an admin office in Midtown. This is all in New York City. And one of the things I felt during the day when I was going to the office every day, because that's what was expected of society, somehow that all ended in March of 2020, because we weren't all nomads like Chris. Chris got a beat on that, I think, a little bit earlier on. And it was this concept that I finally, when I was finally sitting at my desk and I wasn't expected to be anywhere, I didn't have that overarching feeling that I was always in the wrong place. And I always had that. We had a data center that we had until 2019 in New Jersey when I lived in Brooklyn. I actually do live in New Jersey now, just to make it as efficient as possible. I moved to New Jersey after we sold the data center in New Jersey. But, if I was in the data center in New Jersey, there was always some reason I needed to be in New York. And I was always found myself going back and forth, feeling like I was never at the right place. And when suddenly the expectation of being in a physical place left, it was almost like a weight got lifted off the shoulders, because we were just able to focus on what do we need to accomplish that day, and how do we engage with the right people, and what's the point of going to an office just to sit on Zoom calls with someone that's going to be all over the place all day. And that I don't know why that was something that we needed a pandemic to tell us, but it just became this obvious, why was I running around all day? Why was I going from office to office all day? And what was I accomplishing other than burning up Metro cards and using fossil fuels and doing all sorts of things that I was spending all this time in between the things that I wanted to be doing, which is having a conversation like this. Maybe not this one specifically, but with other people. I'm kidding. I love you too.
Yeah, I mean, and it burns up so much time too, right? This travel.
It's crazy.
Just amazing amounts of our life are spent getting somewhere, to your point, that maybe we don't even need to be. I found it refreshing. Also, it's a little bit different in New York City. I found commuting in New York City to be much less stressful because I wasn't the one in charge. Like I'm either in the back of a car or in a train. Someone else is driving. I don't have to worry about whether it slows down or not. It's just, hey, if I'm late, I'm late because the train stopped and everyone else is going to be late anyway. And it's a lot less stressful. I remember when I was living in Denver still and actually driving myself to work every day, it's not only a time waster, but I would show up to work just ticked off because I'd been navigating traffic for 45 minutes or longer to get there. Anyway, so I just +1 on let's keep everything flexible, man. The flip side of kind of being able to make your own schedule and be comfortable in running this organization that you've kind of built in your image a little bit. Being in that position, I mean, I'm guessing that a lot of people are looking to you for answers a lot of the time.
Heavy hangs the crown, as they say.
Yeah. And it's actually wiped all the hair off of your head. It's so heavy.
It slides off. It actually heavy slides the crown now. There's there's no friction. I got no friction up there at all. Thanks for bringing that up, Ponytail.
Thanks. Sorry. I had to. You put the crown out there. So but the question though, seriously is, do you ever feel like you're not smart enough?
Every second of every day. The only thing I've convinced myself of, I'm a huge fan of faking it till you make it, which is probably a phrase that you could use as the tagline of Imposter Syndrome. And I started this business when I was 17 and a half, 18 years old. I say all the time, like, I don't know another way to do it because I've never worked anywhere real, right? So, I've been an imposter from the get-go. But what I've recognized, what gets me through the day and allows me to look in the mirror is I recognize everybody else's as well. I think, especially in our industry where, we were there at the outset where everyone was just guessing their way through it. And I think so much of the internet flows through these duct tape, switches and routers that are still in place that happen to still be working from 20, 30 years ago that just haven't been, updated or fixed or changed because, we're to a certain extent a victim of our own success. So there is no right way or wrong way. There's just, does it work or does it not? And I'm sure you'll get all sorts of fan mail. Do people do that anymore? Or calls about how, no, that's wrong. There is a specific right way to do everything. But, I've always been a fan of, keep it simple, stupid, and all of those really different phrases. But at the end of the day, I think everyone is lying about how confident they are in a particular thing. A lot of people benefit from luck. I think that has more to do with success than any particular knowledge base. And I think it's a great name for a podcast because if everyone's being honest, we're all imposters. I mean, how could we possibly know the right way to do anything? Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face, as Mike Tyson said. And every guy that's running infrastructure has a plan until something goes down and then they panic. I am the coach of my son's Little League team. We had our first game. Can you imagine how much therapy those kids are going to need? We had our first game this past Saturday. And, we had a practice before that where, we had them in the field and we hit something to the shortstop and said, throw it to first base because that's where the runner is going to be. And you're trying to get these kids to understand the way the game is played until they're in the game. And the kids just panic. They all just run after that same ball and they're all like going into the outfield. And it got better as the game went on. But we are experiential animals, right? So the only way you learn is by doing. And if you wait until you have all of the required knowledge to become an expert in your field before you start, you'll never get started.
Well, especially in technology, because if you wait so long, it's going to change by the time you start anyway.
Right. I mean, it's already outdated.
Yeah, no, exactly. Although then again, you could work on those routers and switches that are 10 years old already. But no, that is a really good point. And I think the other bit that I really relate to is that sense of, well, I don't really know what I'm doing, so I'm just going to try my best. And if it works, awesome. If it doesn't work, I'm just going to keep trying because I'm too stubborn.
Right. Well, look, I think at the end of the day, I don't want to pretend like this is a one-man show, right? So, of course, you bring people into your sphere that are, to a certain extent, experts in their field, recognizing that there is no one-size-fits-all approach. And the way we look at issues within our ecosystem is because things go wrong all the time over the course of 27 years. It would take a lot more than fingers and toes to count like the number of things that went down. And I appreciate the fact that you're swallowing your yawns. But if you can admit, if you're vulnerable enough to be able to say, I'm not an expert in this, I need help. I need, people to recognize that we're not experts in it, and it's a team effort. But the way we look at issues is as learning experiences, So, you try not to repeat the same mistakes over again, but you recognize that these things are organic pieces of equipment. They're organic, almost beings that, whether it's on the power side or the network side or the cooling side, that sometimes it just doesn't work out how they're expected to work. And you just do your best. You try to document as much as possible and bring people in your sphere that are not about, CYA, that's cover your buttocks, and just focus on, like, no one is going to get blamed for the shit happens approach. We're all on the same team, and sometimes shit happens, and most of the time it doesn't. You're not going to be blamed for, something that goes wrong, as long as, we document it and we move forward, and we're a more powerful organization for it after an incident is resolved than before.
I mean, that rings true for me as well, because I work in security. So stuff happens. It's always going to happen. But creating that culture of learning is so critical to success, or at least that's my opinion. The one last thing I had a question about is, throughout your career, I imagine, as you mentioned, you had huge mistakes. You had successes, you had failures, you had learning experiences. Was there ever a time that you were kind of stuck and you didn't know how to go forward or where to go? And how did you get out of that rut?
Certainly. And plenty of times. I mean, it's not like it just happens once. Again, human nature is to doubt yourself. Like anybody, that the most confident person on the planet that you can find is usually just overcompensating for the fact that they are scared children on the inside that are using their egos to try to block it. I think at the end of the day, the mantra that I use, if there is one, and I'm terrible at doing anything that makes me sane. So, I'm not good at, I want to be someone that's good at meditating and all those things, but that's a Grundleman thing. The genes didn't come to my end of the gene pool. But you just think that there's nowhere to go but forward. When you get knocked out, you have to it takes time. Sometimes you're not popping back up. Sometimes, it takes a couple of days, or it takes some rumination, or you have to, mourn for an idea that didn't work out, or something that you were passionate about that failed. But there's nowhere to go but forward, right? If you stick your head in the sand, it'll only work for so long. Sometimes you have to do that as a coping mechanism for some time. But 27 years goes by. Again, drink, everyone. And what is the alternative but to move forward? Give up? Then what?
Never.
Never. You'll never quit.
Speaking of time, we have done it again. We've run clean out of it for today. Phil, thanks for finally joining us and sharing your story with the Imposter Syndrome Network. And thank you to all of our listeners for your time and attention. We know these are your most valuable resources, and it really means a lot that you spend them with us. Thank you. If you want more ISN goodness between the weekly shows, feel free to join our LinkedIn group to give or get career advice, mentorship, and community support. Now, Phil, before we let you go, back to Velociraptor Ranching, I think it is, I do have one more question for you. Tell us a little bit about this Nomad Futurist podcast, foundation, this project. What the heck is this? Is it as fun as this podcast has been? Are we in for something serious?
If it's not fun, I'm not doing it, right? So it has to be some level of fun, because it's the only thing. It's my key differentiator, as they say in our world. At least I think it is. If I'm having fun, I assume Zoe's having fun. If Zoe's having fun, I'm happy. So the Nomad Futurist is, I have a co-founder. His name is Nabil Mahmoud, right? And we've been in and around this industry for years. We only met in 2019 on the conference speaking circuit. And the one thing we agreed on when we met again in 2020 at the first PTC I ever attended, he actually lives in Hawaii, so he goes to PTC, lucky man, is that, we've been going to these conferences for the last 20 years or so, or 27 years, drink. And we realized it's the same faces, just getting older and older, and there's not a lot of new blood coming into our industry. So we decided, or I just had this fun idea of starting a podcast where it was completely non-commercial, and we would interview all the people that we know that are at the highest levels of our industry about their personal journeys, in the hopes that it would resonate with some of the youth today that, might, first of all, not know that our industry exists because we're a victim of our own success, and they all know they're all beholden to technology, but as soon as it doesn't work, they turn into Neanderthals and they just start smacking it or wondering, what the hell's wrong with this piece of junk. But also because they might think that in order to be involved in our industry, you need to be a computer science whiz or a scientist or have a lab coat or whatever. when in reality, everybody that has been in our industry for as long as we all have, maybe not as long as I have, but as long as most of us have, fell into it by happenstance. Nobody was growing up saying, I want to be in the critical infrastructure business when I grow up. So that's how it started. Pandemic hit. We were both sitting at our desks in our respective, corners of the world. And we decided to start it over Zoom and see how it went. Now we're in our third or fourth season. We've interviewed, somewhat like 80 episodes that we've released. And it's gotten some really interesting play. Fast forward to 2022, we decided to take it one step further and started a 501c3 nonprofit called the Nomad Futurist Foundation, whose goal is to create academic tools, take all of this brain trust that we have through, the people that we know in this industry and allow them to share their passion about our industry with the youth and underserved markets and underserved communities, and try to demystify our industry at a younger and younger level so that we're teaching children not really how technology works, because they all know, my kids knew how to use an iPad before they knew how to speak, but why technology works and understand that foundational level, and then advocate with, the Department of Education, with different school districts and school systems to try to just kind of incrementally add the foundational elements of the internet industry into existing kind of STEAM curricula. And that is the 10-minute response to what should have been a 30-second question.
No, that's excellent. That's awesome. And I think it's really interesting that, Zoe and I essentially did the same thing a couple of years later, right? I mean, independently, we came up with almost the same idea. I think this podcast is very similar. I promise. We didn't steal it.
Independently. All right. It's okay. You know what? What is it? Mimicry is the best form of flattery. I'll take it.
That's right.
It's fun.
That's what they say.
It's fine.
And it's great to see the foundation come out. We'll obviously put links in the show notes so folks can kind of listen into that podcast as well. If you like this one, you'll probably love that one. And, what can people do to support the foundation? I mean, is it donations? Is it volunteering? Or how do folks get involved?
It's both. We, because we're a 501c3, we're funded entirely by donations, corporate, individual, et cetera. We have a set, we have advocates and ambassadors and advisors that join us to provide, time and effort and volunteering. We're about to launch in Q3 of this year the Nomad Futurist Academy in partnership with CheckHub, which is an online platform that allows the thought leaders in our industry to create small lesson plans that are palatable, that just, show their passion for technology, the things that they've learned, and that those will be tools that can be shared, individually with kids or as part of a set of tools that we can give to organizations, schools, et cetera, that will allow us who are, they have this old adage, those that don't do teach. Everyone in our industry, because it's so young as an industry, we've never had the luxury of having teachers. There's not really, even today, a set curricula in colleges and universities. It's getting better now than it was certainly when I was in college 350 years ago. First graduating class of the millennium. I graduated in 2000. So the academy is going to be a big one, and we'd love the support of the community. Certainly, donations and sponsorships help, and our goal is to make those assets free for people to use how they can.
That's awesome. I think I speak on behalf of the entire Imposter Syndrome Network that we support this, and hopefully, folks will go check those links out and get involved.
Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
We will be back next week.
Could you email us a headshot for our social stuff?
Absolutely.
One note, it needs to be an actual bust.
What? It has to be an actual bust. We'd email you a metal.
We get a lot of pictures like this for some reason. I don't know if there's a new thing for headshots to be with one shoulder not in the shot, or the top of the head's cut off.
I'm going to tell you this, and I really hope you use this in your B-roll. When you have a face as pretty as this one, you make sure the entire thing is in the shot. What is so funny about that?